Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspirational show coming up with two amazing men. Our first guest is Grant-Faulkner, and he's here today to talk to us about his new book, Pep Talk for Writers. Grant is the executive director of National Novel Writing Month. He's co-founder of 100-Word Story. He's a writer, tap dancer, alchemist, cartoonist, and preacher. So let's welcome to the show, Grant.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Marianne.
You know, it is such a pleasure to have you here. My goodness, I am so excited we're having this discussion in regards to not only your new book, but like ways that we can get inspired and get our creativity mojo back.
Absolutely. I feel like there's this great quote from Picasso, and he says that every child is born an artist. The challenge is how to be an artist once you grow up. And I think that's a challenge for all of us. It's hard to make creativity a priority in a busy life. And so that's largely what my book is about, is how to be creative year-round, how to develop that creative mindset so that you're nourishing yourself every day for your creative projects.
Well, and so our listeners can understand a little bit more about you. Why don't you tell us, like, what started you on the path of writing for yourself?
You know, I just read a quote this morning from Ursula Le Guin, and she said, when she's asked, when did you decide to become a writer, she says, I was always a writer. And I thought that was so interesting because I have always felt like I was a writer as well. I don't remember a time when I wasn't thinking of stories, and even before I, knew how to technically write words, I was a writer. And I think, for me, I have a special affinity for writing and storytelling, but we as human beings, we are wired to tell stories. That is how we create meaning in the world. That's how we navigate life. I started writing when I was, basically 3 years old. I made a more formal decision when I was 20, and I was in college, and I had to declare a major, and I was deciding between economics, the very practical major, and then an English major. And very fortunately, I went and I studied abroad for a semester in Paris, and I basically spent most of my time or my free time reading novels in cafes, and I decided that was the life for me, and I've never turned back since then.
Yeah, I think once you get bit by that reading bug, it's so easy to kind of just dive in and be immersed in that world. I enjoy books, so I get it.
Yeah, and it was really who I made that decision. I always say that the field of economics is much the better for it. I'm just I've always, just like I said earlier, have a special affinity, if not an obsession, with writing, and it's not an easy path to take professionally, certainly, but I do believe in that. The follow your bliss mantra, that if you follow what you're passionate about, you will find a way to make it work in your life. So my writing life is, I've always written fiction, and that's been my primary form of writing, but I've been a journalist. I've done corporate communications. I would say I've written everything under the sun except a vacuum cleaner manual, and I'm sure someday I will write that.
Well, I'm sure you're going to be way too busy writing a lot of other things and having, any of the major vacuum companies getting in touch with you. Although, you're pretty creative, so I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe I'll write. Yeah, I'll try to take a very creative approach to that next vacuum cleaner manual. It'll be amazing. It needs to be reimagined.
Well, and so in your experience, because, gosh, we know you're the executive director of National Novel Writing Month, in your experience with all the people that you meet, do you think that sometimes people feel like they need permission to start creating?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that it makes me sad to hear that, although I relate to that. And I think especially with writing, I think a lot of people have a hard time saying, I am a writer. And we say here at NaNoWriMo the definition of being a writer is to sit down and write. You define yourself by writing. But I think people get hung up on, that I'm not a real writer unless I'm published, or I'm not a real writer unless I take a writing workshop. But the best way to learn to write a novel is really to sit down and write it. It's just such an enormous and unique experience, and every novel is different, so you're always learning. So I think people, I don't know, for whatever reason, too many people, I think, put obstacles between themselves and their creativity, and that's a limiting force in their life, I believe. I think by writing your story and by seeing yourself as a creator, then you become a change agent. You know, you're acting in the world instead of just consuming the things that come at you.
Then you can add so much value, too, for what's going on. I mean, if you're writing in regards to self-help or business development or even cooking, I mean, I could use some help with that.
Absolutely. I mean, writing takes so many forms. I mean, it can be therapy. It's definitely or therapeutic. It's definitely. I think it's the most important or effective critical thinking tool. Language, we think through language, or most people do. I also think that writing a novel is such a wonderful imaginative exercise, and part of that is that you're writing characters you're seeing through other people's eyes, so you're seeing the world with a multiplicity of perspectives, and by doing that, you're building empathy and tolerance for other people. So I think our stories are the fundamental way that we connect with other people, and they're the fundamental ways that we connect with ourselves as well.
Well, you know, in your book, Pep Talk for Writers contains 52 different insights and actions for writers to get motivated. What are some of the tips that would spark creativity?
Yeah, you know, one of the mythologies I want to tear down is the mythology of writer's block. I feel like too many people say, I would write my story, but I have writer's block. And I don't believe in writer's block. And last night I was in a launch event for my book, and a lot of my events I do what I call word sprints, and that we have a rich tradition of word sprinting in NaNoWriMo. And the premise is that you banish your inner editor, that naysaying voice, and I give a prompt. Last night's prompt was what'd she say? She smelled the smoke before she saw the flames, and the challenge was just simply to write as many words as you could. You know, don't lift the pen off the paper. And so most people, everyone wrote words, and most people wrote 200, 300, 400 words. You know, and so that's proof to me. I've never seen someone who doesn't write to a prompt and have that like 5-minute writing sprint. So the book goes through a number of different techniques like that about how to, you know, rid yourself of those obstacles that prevent you from writing and just to jump in and do it. And I think that once people see that you know, it's mysterious. It's almost magical how a story can come out of that, because those stories, no one was planning their stories before they started writing last night, but they just, you know, once you write one sentence, another sentence tends to follow, and you create your own creative momentum.
Well, and so to kind of piggyback on what you said about writer's block, because I've heard that quite a bit, and I think I would agree with you. I think it's kind of like this roadblock people throw up, maybe for whatever reasons that they're not wanting to get in that frame, or maybe they're having difficulty moving into a creative space. Have you ever come across somebody that says, you know, I don't have a good imagination or a creative bone in my body? So I don't have.
Yeah. Oh, I get so I'm kind of disturbed when I hear that, because I will hear people say I'm not. I would, you know, I'll ask them if they, you know, encourage them to do National Novel Writing Month, and they'll say, "Oh, I would, but I'm not a creative type." And you know, we are creative types. That's the definition of being a human. We are creators. I mean, going back to the Picasso quote, if you walk into a preschool, I challenge you to find one child who's not creative. You know, they are finger painting and dancing just for the sake of dancing, and singing and playing. And I think, unfortunately, there's something that can happen as one gets older where you, I don't know, it could be through a creative wound. It could be just having no one encourage you to pursue your creativity, or people tell themselves they're not a creative type. And whatever it is, it's such a limiting, I think it's a limiting way to live. I think it's a limiting way to see yourself. I think it's creativity for me is you know, you have to. My book isn't, I mean, it's focused on writing, but it's really about being creative in so many different aspects of your life, and finding ways to ignite that you know, flame in yourself, and to recognize the opportunities to be creative, and also just ways to nourish yourself so that you're you know, so that creativity flows throughout your life.
I'd have to agree with you. I felt your book offered a lot of motivation and encouragement. So no matter what it is that you're looking for, creativity, to kind of, it could be for work or for a project you're working on or whatever, the principles apply regardless.
Yeah, I think, sometimes people ask us what our impact on the world is at NaNoWriMo. And, we do actually have a Young Writers Program where nearly 100,000 kids and teens write novels with us each year, and we support 5,000 classrooms to teach novel writing. But I think, the impact is it might not be a direct equation, but we believe that when you become a creator, when you see yourself as a creator, it is transformative. You do become feel yourself as more magical and more empowered, and you will be a better teacher or a better boss or a better employee or a better son or daughter or parent. And it's because you are an actor in the world. You're putting your creativity in the world and thinking about how you can make things better and more beautiful. And that's a really important way to live.
Well, and you touched on something that I'd like to talk about a little bit. We're not going through, obviously, your entire book, for a few reasons, but one, because I really feel people need to pick up their own copy of Pep Talk for Writers, because it's such a powerful book. But you talked about creative wounds. So what are those, and how could we overcome those?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, nearly everybody, I don't know if I've ever talked to somebody who doesn't have a creative wound, and I think they take a number of different forms. Oftentimes it's just somebody telling people that, oh, that's not a good drawing, or that's not a good story, you're not a good writer. And whether that's been an unfortunate experience with a teacher or a friend or a parent, unfortunately most of us have those stories. It happened to me actually with a professor getting my MFA, and she was very, very kind of unnecessarily severe in her critique of a story and kind of unfair. And when we're shut down like that, it's hard not to be shut down. Some people when they hear that, when they experience such a wound, they give up entirely. For instance, I stopped drawing basically when I was in fourth grade. And it was largely through, I like to draw, but I didn't hear good things about my drawing, or I had an art teacher who critiqued it. And unfortunately I gave it up, but it would be nice to have continued, because I think, drawing is a creative expression that is important. And it doesn't matter the quality of my drawing so much, it's more about the act of doing it and exploring the world through that. And that's the same thing with writing, I think.
I'd agree with you on that.
I think sometimes with writing... Oh, go ahead.
Huh? No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say sometimes I think there are so many wonderful writing teachers in the world, and I've experienced them, and they're amazing. But sometimes I think people, their writing has been, they see their writing as full of the red marks, the red marks of correcting them on the page. And what NaNoWriMo does is the best way to learn to do something is through your passions. And that's why our Young Writers Program is so effective, is because kids actually, instead of learning writing through red marks and telling them what they're doing wrong, they learn writing through exploring their imagination and putting their words on the page and having, feeling a sense of agency. And I think that applies, for adults as well. I think we need those moments where we're just being playful. We're just on this playground of storytelling and pursuing our passions.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, my goodness, sometimes it's well-meaning teachers or parents or just adults that have something to say in regards to art that could be so destructive, or in regards to writing. And you look at this and you're like, wow, it really kind of will change the trajectory of someone's life. I've seen it happen with quite a few people I know.
It's true, and you're right. It can be inadvertent, and it can come from a place of the best intentions. But if you are feeling delicate or fragile about your capabilities, it can also be very diminishing. And so, I think, and sometimes people afflict the creative wound on themselves too. I remember, so I'm going back through my stories of when I shut the door on different types of creativity, but I remember being in high school and I had a passing thought of like, wouldn't it be cool to start a band? And I didn't know how to play the guitar, and I, for some reason, told myself I was too old to learn the guitar at the age of 17. and so, I'm not too old now to learn the guitar, and I'm much older than that. So, but I do think that some people will shut the door because they'll say, well, I've never taken a writing class. I don't know how to write a novel. I want to write a novel, but I don't know how to, so I won't do it. Mm-hmm. But as I said earlier, the best way to learn to write a novel is to do it and just to jump in. And practice.
Well, and that stuff isn't so scary once you get into it. It's not that big a deal, It's go have fun with it.
It's not. They say the moment of fear is really before you start, and once you start, that fear goes away because you're involved in the project.
Mm-hmm. Now, how I know a lot of times writers will compare themselves to other writers. So, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think it can be both. I think mostly it's a bad thing, and that's when writers are envious of other writers or when they compare themselves to other writers in terms of how their, publishing is going or their career is going. And I really think envy is a creativity killer. But we all feel it, right? We all, once you, in any aspect of life, you're bound to feel it. And when I feel envy towards another writer, I have this rule that I try to flip it and do something, a generous act in the world, to write somebody an email of encouragement or, just to do something good. Because like I said, I think the phrase that I have in the book is that envy is like a poison that you're giving to another person, except that you drink it. So it's really poisonous to yourself in the end. But I think the good part, so I think can be a good part in terms of comparing yourself to others, and it's when you're doing it in a good way. Like, for instance, if you're comparing your writing or trying to reach new heights and you're reading, your favorite authors and you're trying to, it's not like I don't feel like you're in competition with them, but you're trying to be just as good as them. You're trying to tell a really good story, and I think that type of comparison can be motivating.
Yeah, I'm all for setting the bar really high.
Yeah.
And taking that challenge and seeing how well you can do, but that comparison thing can be just, it can suck the life out of you.
It really is. And I tell this story in the book where, one day I was walking through the airport and I saw Time magazine with Jonathan Franzen was on the cover, and the title of it was The Great American Novelist. And, my publications were pretty scanty at the time, or my stories that had been published. And, I was deeply envious of him. But if you really dig into the story, you're like, well, gosh, why, this guy, Jonathan Franzen, he doesn't know who I am. No one's keeping score. It's not like Jonathan Franzen 100, Grant-Faulkner 2, It was all something that I was projecting into the world, a storyline that I was creating that wasn't helpful, So I think as authors, just to protect our creativity, it's just really good to try to be happy for other people's successes, really, in the end.
Well, and this kind of leads me to my next question. Often writers, they feel like what they did was a failure as far as their writing is concerned. Is that a good thing, failing, or not so much?
Well, it depends on how you define failure. I think with a rough draft in particular, I think writers should treat it as like an exploratory exercise and a creative experiment. And in that sense, like you need to take wrong turns just because you need to take creative risks. And so that type of failure is part of any type of creativity. I think Edison did 6,000 experiments on 6,000 different types of light bulbs before he found the one that worked. And I think that applies to any creative endeavor. If you're talking about failure, are you thinking about failure more in the sense of like writing something and not getting it published?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a different type of failure, and writers are bound to feel. Rejection is a huge part of it, and rejection can be a kind of damning thing, but I think really it's an opportunity to go back to your work and to think it through and to think about how to make it better. So I forget what writer said this, but she said a prerequisite before you know anything about the craft of writing, just thicken your skin. It's the first thing you should do as a writer. But rejection can be a good thing because it can deepen your commitment if you take a positive stance towards it, and it can help you with your writing. Because as I said, after I've been rejected, sometimes those are the opportunities where I go back to the story and I read it and I look for its weaknesses and I think about how to improve it.
And maybe sometimes the place that it's being submitted to isn't a good fit no matter what, Exactly.
Every time somebody has told me that, they've sent out a story and it got rejected by 2 or 3 people, so they're giving up on it, it's a bad story. I'm like, those 2 or 3 people who read the story, you don't even know who they are. You don't truly know their criteria. You don't know what stories you were up against, and choosing to publish something can be largely a subjective experience. So I think writers, when they feel that they have a really good story to put into the world, they need to be really determined with it and to not accept those initial rejections as something that's necessarily bad. I mean, the whole publishing history is littered with stories of writers who faced down tremendous rejections. I think J.K. Rowling, I want to say she was rejected by 30 agents or 30 publishing houses. I can't remember the exact story, but there are so many stories like that.
Well, usually it ends up kind of being a number game too. You'll get so many rejections before you get one person that says yes.
It's a little bit like I view it as playing the lottery, And if you put your story out there 30 times, instead of 10 times or instead of 5 times, you're more likely to get a hit with one of them.
Well, and I know in your book you talk about the importance of sleep and creativity. Can you touch on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, as a lifetime insomniac, these are my qualifications. Well, I do think that sometimes the anguish in writing, the not sleeping and drinking too much coffee or doing whatever you need to do to get words on the page. I mean, writers tend to fall into that trap because it is, in some ways, a very arduous task. But I think we underrate these things that are very available to us, like a good night's sleep. And sleep is actually, it helps us focus more. It provides fuel for our imaginations. We're creating more vibrant connections in our brain because of sleep, and that happens during sleep and then afterwards because we're refreshed. So even though I don't often practice what I preach, I do really want to do more of it. I mean, I am trying to become a better sleeper, which is difficult to do in life, I mean, I'm a coffee drinker, so sometimes I have one cup of coffee too much. But yeah, I think that chapter is, though, in part and in tandem with some other chapters, it's about, to be a creator. I think it's worth reflecting on your lifestyle and what is helping you create and what is hindering you. And that can be something like sleep, or it can be a creative wound, or it can be, other things. So, yeah, there are a lot of chapters in the book about, examining your life and trying to fortify your creative mindset.
Well, I know there's times when I used to do quite a bit of sketching and stuff like that when I was in college, and I would be up until 2 or 3 in the morning not really realizing what the time was. So I can understand that whole insomniac portion of it.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like good sleeplessness to me. That sounds like you were in a flow state and just deeply immersed in your work. And maybe you're a nighttime creator. Are you a nighttime creator?
I'm a little bit of both, I think. It just depends on, if my dog wakes me up early or not.
Yeah. I just heard a segment on sleep on NPR, and I was surprised. They said something like 30% of people are owls, meaning nighttime people, or nighttime creators, and 30% of the people are larks, and then everybody else is kind of in between. I read a book recently on creative people's rituals, and I thought about 80% of them were morning creators. But the point is that the point of the sleep segment was that we are wired for certain a certain rhythm of when we're productive during the day, and I think once you identify what type of person you are, you just need to take advantage of that. So if you're a lark and need to work best in the morning, then try to make the morning your time for your creativity. Yeah,
and take advantage of what works best for you.
Yeah, which doesn't mean though if you can't use your morning. I think I often tell the story of Toni Morrison, who when she wrote her first novel, she was a single working mom in New York City, and after working all day and taking care of her kids in the evening, she had about 15 minutes before she went to bed. And she might have been a morning creator, but that was the only time she had. And so she wrote for 15 minutes a day, and that's how she wrote her first novel.
Wow. I've known a couple other single moms who have done the same kind of thing, but at night they wait for the kids to be in bed and sleeping for them to go ahead and, get to where they can do their own writing and have their quiet time. So it's... Yeah.
I think the main thing is really to look at your life and to think about where there are opportunities. And for Toni Morrison, it was only that 15 minutes of the day, but she had the willpower and the determination to make creativity a priority. And you build big things through small increments. And so that 15 minutes a day can lead to something big.
I get it. I mean, I've had people that I've worked with have gone, gosh, I want to write a book, but it's like such a daunting task. It's such a huge thing. And so it's like, well, if you take it like a page a day, then it's not that bad at the end of the year you have a book.
It's amazing how that simple math can help you. I mean, going back to last night's word sprint that I did in 5 minutes, so let's say the average that people wrote was 300 words. And so that's 300 words a day is 9,000 words a month, which is 98,000 words a year, which is a really hefty novel. So you can do it. You just got to carve out the time.
It sounds like you have another book on the way, huh? Well, and do you have another book in the works? Because, I mean, gosh, with all the writing you've done, I'm sure you have one or two in the wings.
I do. I have a collection of short stories and a novel with my agent now. I'm halfway through the rough draft of another novel, and then I'm planning another nonfiction book on creativity.
Oh, my goodness.
Should keep me occupied for the next couple of years.
Well, when you have your next book out, we would love to hear about it and have you back on the show to talk about it because, my goodness, you're such a wealth of information when it comes to writing and just creativity altogether. I mean, what a joy it would be to have you here.
Thanks, Marianne. I'd love to come back.
Oh, awesome. Well, and Grant, where can people connect with you and be part of your community and also learn more about your book, Pep Talk for Writers?
Yeah, so NaNoWriMo, the organization I work for, is just nanowrimo.org, and you can find everything there about how to participate in National Novel Writing Month. I'm online in all the usual ways. grant-faulkner.com is my website. At grant-faulkner is my Twitter handle. That's Faulkner with a U. Same thing on Facebook. And then Pep Talks for Writers, I think it's available in all the usual places online and in bookstores. So a simple Google search should take you there.
Grant, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today.
Thank you. This was wonderful to talk with you.
It was just absolutely fun, and we'll be doing this again real soon.
Great.
We're going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1, 2, 3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Do you know that you can become a genius at any age? Do you know that you can change your life and create a brilliant life for yourself? Hi, I am Olympia LaPointe, an award-winning rocket scientist who you more than likely have seen on TED Talks, Impact Theory, and PBS. Check out my latest book, Answers Unleashed, The Science of Unleashing Your Brain's Power. Simply go to answersunleashed.com books and check it out for yourself. You'll find the tools to help you create the life you've always wanted.
The highly acclaimed and newly released book, The Hand Part 2 by Lynn Van Praagh Grattan, describes the journey between a psychic medium and a family who lost a son. Messages from Beyond Eternity's Gate is of love and healing. For more information, visit www.lynnvanpraagh-grattan.com. That's www.lynnvanpraagh-grattan.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. I am so honored to be introducing our next guest, David Hallberg, and he's here today to talk to us about his new book, A Body of Work. Now, David was the first American to join the Moscow Ballet as a principal dancer and continues to dance around the world as a resident guest artist with the Australian Ballet. He also started the David Hallberg Scholarship that mentors young aspiring boys into a career of ballet. As a principal dancer and dazzling artist, the New Yorker described David as the most exciting male dancer in the Western world. So let's welcome to the show, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It is such a pleasure to have you here. I mean, my goodness, you have been such an inspiration, not to only the people that get to see you on stage, but to millions of other people who are looking to add creativity to their lives.
Thank you. Yeah, it's become an imperative part of my life, so I'm glad I can share it.
Well, and so it leads me to actually my first question. You know, what inspired you to write your memoir?
Well, I started writing the memoir 5 years ago, and life was very different 5 years ago. I was traveling around the world and really burning the candle on both ends, I have to admit. Mm-hmm. And then I suffered a debilitating injury. At the beginning wasn't actually so bad. I had an operation to fix something in my left foot. But then the operation failed sort of miserably, and what would have been a 6-month recovery, a year later I was having a second operation to fix the first. And it was through that time where I lost, obviously my physical ability to express myself as an artist, but as well my emotional and mental sort of capacity to deal with all of these setbacks and disappointments. And I finally escaped to Australia with an amazing rehabilitation team for 14 months. And there I found the true message of the book. There I realized that I had such an honest, real story to tell the reader about really building yourself back up and building your life back up from nothing, climbing to the height of it, plummeting down and then incrementally climbing back up to a rebirth.
Well, I think it would be so difficult, when because if you are relying on your body and that's your career, your physique and being able to dance and to move, and then something happens, it could really kind of put people in a tailspin.
Absolutely. Injury is an inevitability in any athlete's career, whether or not it lasts, 3 weeks or 2.5 years, as it did for me. It's a part of the profession, and it's just a matter of, I think, how you choose to grow during that time. I think injury or loss, whether if you're not an athlete, it can be it's a moment that completely shakes you up and breaks you down. But it's a choice. You can either choose to learn from the experience and become even a better person than you were before, or you can choose a different path, which can lead to resentment and bitterness and all of those negative aspects that can go along with it.
Yeah, and a lot of times it can be really easy for people to kind of get into that mindset, and I really applaud you because, I mean, you kind of refocused and brought everything kind of right back to your the glory that you have now.
Yeah, I almost left the career. It was a potentially career-ending injury, and I saw the fork in the road, and I just decided to give it one last shot, fight it with one last punch. And it was that the course of that time that I spent in Australia for 14 months that I just escaped life. I I turned off email and social media and my cell phone, and I just decided to heal. And it took a long time. I mean, I thought I'd be gone 6 months. I was gone 14. But it was that time that really changed me as a person and as an artist. And then, it gave me such a clear message to put in my book and to share with audiences.
Yeah, that's so important. Well, and I know that we don't really want to touch too much on what that message is because everyone should buy their own copy of A Body of Work. They need to go and pick that up and definitely be giving that out as gifts for the holidays. But, you talk also about, kind of growing up. And I think a lot of times when people see someone who's just as talented and successful as you, they kind of think that, they grow up with a silver spoon in their mouths.
Absolutely. And, I think I run across artists and especially dancers who, they're given a natural ability to dance. And I think what's beautiful about injury, I can't believe I just said that, but the beautiful thing about injury is that it forces you to reconsider gratitude. I mean, I'm a completely different person after this experience. I'm so grateful to be able to express art, to be an artist, to be creative, and although I was grateful before, there's nothing like being shaken to your core to really have you reconsider everything in your life.
How is it when you dance now? Do you feel just like gratitude flowing through every cell in your body as you're moving?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I'm extremely grateful for being able to perform again and just work every day, be in the studio rehearsing. But I have to say what's been interesting about getting back is what has seeped in before the injury and after. The similar doubt and fear of a performance, the sort of insecurities that go along with coming out on stage and dancing in front of thousands of people. And I think I've embraced that, though, as a healthy thing because it means that I care. It means that I deeply care about what I'm doing and how I portray my dancing on stage. And it's just been interesting to see what has left me forever post-injury and what has come back and I think will remain with me my entire career.
Well, you touched on this just a little bit, but, when we talk about going through periods of loneliness and insecurity and self-doubt, I think a lot of people, you look so confident when you dance that they wouldn't even equate that to you.
Absolutely. I mean, they do say everything is beautiful to ballet, right? Mm-hmm. But I think audiences would be so surprised at the inner dialogue. right before you're about to step on stage, and even the inner dialogue on stage. It's a completely different story. And but hopefully what we show is control and finesse and commitment. But living it is a completely different story, I think.
Yeah. When you first started dancing, as a child, and I saw one of these great videos of you as 16 years old, and you're in the studio and you are owning it. You did such a beautiful job. At what point were you kind of going, gosh, this is my passion. I have to do this?
It was well before actually the video that you saw on YouTube. Mm-hmm. I think I first saw my idol gliding across gliding across the TV screen. I mean, his name is Fred Astaire, and I wanted to be exactly like him, and I was young enough to not. I mean, I didn't think consciously of it. I just was fascinated. And it was from 8 years old on, my fascination and my obsession just grew and grew. And there was never any doubt. There was never a question of whether I would do anything else.
It's easy to see that you belong exactly where you're at because, I mean, you're just so just amazing. You're just an amazing dancer, and I just don't say that lightly. I mean, you really, truly are. And
Thank you very much.
Oh, of course. And it's such a joy to read your book, A Body of Work, and I think everyone's going to want to pick up their own copy and have that. And I know in your book you also talk about some of the people that were inspirations to you along the way. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Sure. My first inspiration, of course, was my teacher who trained me. And he didn't just teach me, the fundamentals of ballet technique. He taught me this grit and this focus and this work ethic that has stayed with me until now. And I think that's partially what got me through the darkest of times is that sort of focus that was instilled in me when I was very young, when I was 14 years old. And then there are other artists and dancers, partners that I've danced with that greatly inspire me. And it's so interesting because, when you dance with someone, when you dance with a ballerina that you connect so deeply with, it goes beyond dancing steps or lifting her or turning her, and it becomes something completely emotional. I mean, it's almost as if you're in a relationship with this person on stage, and that has changed me as a dancer, and I think turned me into an artist. But you can't plan any of that. It's like falling in love. I mean, we all know what falling in love feels like, and you may want a plan for it, but you really don't. You really don't have one.
It's kind of that synergy that you have with the other dancers. I mean, you could see it. It translates, so beautifully across the stage.
Thank you. Yeah. What's interesting is, I write about this portion in the book about Romeo and Juliet and dancing with my Juliet, who is Natalia Osipova. Mm-hmm. And what becomes the synergy, I think, in a successful portrayal of Romeo and Juliet is that the audience, they become voyeurs. So we are on stage just totally enthralled in the moment, and in a successful performance, you forget that the audience is watching. And then what happens is the audience they zero in more and more, and it's almost as if they don't want to breathe to disrupt the moment. And I felt that, honestly, only 2 or 3 times in my entire career, but it has obviously forever stayed with me.
Sounds like such a beautiful moment, and I know what you're talking about when I go see different plays or ballet or theater. When you're just so tuned in and so part of what's happening, nothing else exists.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of art. I mean, it's the beauty of dance, it's the beauty of acting, it's visual art even. When you walk into a museum and you see a painting or a sculpture that just absolutely takes your breath away. It can be so changing. It can change you so much as a person, I think.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful moment. Well, and I know that your book really also talks about, we talked about like self-doubt, and that seems to be a really big thing for people who are creative, who are artists, speakers, you name it. So, I mean, it's interesting because that topic hits a lot of different careers, a lot of different paths for a lot of people, but everyone feels kind of the same with that.
Yeah, it's true. I just feel like that kind of path, I think everyone can kind of relate to that path.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that whether it's dance, whether it's even just being a spectator, I mean, everyone can relate to something like that, I think.
So what were some of your most shining moments through all of this? I'm sure it'd be like trying to pick a favorite child or a favorite buddy, But what is one that really stands out in your mind like, gosh, that was just, that was the most amazing time ever?
I have to say, becoming a principal at American Ballet Theater, I was 23. I was quite young. I had been in the company 5 years, but since I started studying ballet, my dream was American Ballet Theater. My dream was to become a principal with the company, and my idols were principals here, and I remember it so vividly. I recognized that my dream had come true, and it's such a beautiful thing to be able to say, what you have, a goal that you have set for years. I mean, it was almost 10 years that I wanted that to happen, and it finally did, and it was such a beautiful moment. It wasn't in performance. It was, backstage in a company meeting in front of the dancers, and a very private moment, but it was just so memorable.
Mm. It sounds like, in such a perfect moment when you're able to kind of reach that first goal, because, I mean, like most people, I mean, we obtain that dream and then we've got a few more stacked right above it.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, to be, and I write about this in the book. Once I became principal, I was hungering for more. I was, and I searched sometimes blindly for that next kind of hit or that next kind of goal to attain. And, obviously things unfolded the way they did. I joined the Bolshoi Ballet a couple of years later, and the ride got faster and faster. But what I've learned through the time away is just how, that insatiable hunger, it can be healthy, but it can also cause you to never be satisfied. And I look around me now, and this is a message that I give in the book, is like I look around at my life right now and I'm totally satisfied. I mean, I'm so happy, although I'm still just as hungry and ambitious. It's a different kind of hunger, it's not as sugar-coated.
Well, it's interesting, just from what I've experienced and people that I've known, when they hit certain levels of success, sometimes that hunger is to be better than the Joneses or have more stuff. But I think you've said it so beautifully. It's, when you have that kind of that inner peace and you're able to obtain a certain goal, then it's like the next one, it's great if you make it. You still have that drive and that hunger to get it, but it's not, there's a different force behind driving all that.
Absolutely. And it's again, my mother actually said it really well a couple of days ago. She said, there's room for everybody. And it's true. You don't, I look around me. Yeah, there are dancers that are with me along this ride that are just as good, that are giving other things to the dance world. And there's room for everybody. And I think that can, it can be so detrimental to start to compare and just want more and more and more, other than realizing what you have and realizing what people around you can add to you.
Yeah, because that's really where the beauty is in our journey. Is I mean, you add so much beauty to our lives as people that go to the theater and to ballet. And it's so nice to be able to have that as part of your journey as well. That it's this inner happiness that's feeling you, an inner peace, as opposed to a constant drive. And it's you can see it. I mean, it's a very palatable thing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's a palpable thing, I think, on both sides. It's as a performer and as an audience member.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you traveled, what was one of the most interesting places you went to?
Oh, that is a great question. There's obviously so many, but I would say when I first went to Tokyo, I was probably 21 or something. I mean, Tokyo is one of the most amazing cities. It's so big and busy, but so organized and so on time. And then I went to a country like Cuba. I went to Havana to dance, and Havana is the complete opposite. It's laid back. It's crumbling. It doesn't have McDonald's or 7-Elevens. And it has a soul, of the Cuban people, and ballet there as well is it's so respected and looked up to. It was so fascinating to be in a country like that.
I can only imagine. You can really feel the heart of these different countries as you go and dance at these different places, I would assume.
Absolutely, and there's a big section of the book where I talk about dancing in Cuba and the audiences there, dancing in Japan, dancing in Russia, because I felt like it was so important for the reader to get a feel for, not how it was on stage, but how it was experiencing these cultures.
Mm-hmm. Well, it says so much, and I think from any standpoint, any artist that reads your book will get such great inspiration, not just from the traveling that you did, but just the heart that you brought to each of your performances.
Yeah, I really hope so. I mean, I just chose to be so honest with the book. It's such an honest portrayal of an artist that, traveled the world, but also totally crashed and burned, and then the incremental climb to a sort of rebirth.
When you were kind of coming back up, and I know you had that fork in the road that we talked about a little bit earlier, was there a point in time where you just said, even though you had made a decision, I'm going to give it one more shot, that you thought, what the heck am I doing? You just kind of get discouraged on that journey?
I was discouraged for almost the entire time, and it wasn't until, I was off stage for 2.5 years, so it wasn't until almost into year 2, and I was about to return to the stage in about, 4 months, that I realized that I was going to do it, because I was riddled with such disappointment for so long, and I finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and I had a lot to accomplish to do that, to get on stage and perform again. But for so long, I thought, this is I don't believe that this is ever going to happen again. I was so negative, and rightfully so. I just had so many disappointments. But the true message, I think, of the book is grit and determination and focus, and just really putting one foot in front of the other and focusing on one goal.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times people are always looking for that kind of magic phrase or bullet or what have you that will move them through a situation. And I think your book really has the great inspiration that will help people that are going through a tough time, or people who are because you get a lot of artists that get stuck in their creativity. Like, gosh, I can't do this, I can't get beyond. And so it really provides that inspiration for them to then move forward and how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, I think what the book clearly says to me is that, there's no quick fix, honestly. It took me when I went down to Australia to really rehab and just focus on that, it took me 14 months. Every day almost felt the same. It was day in, day out routine. And there wasn't that star doctor that I saw. There wasn't, there was an amazing team of specialists that I worked with, but it wasn't this kind of quick fix that I think we constantly want.
Well, it probably just took you a while to decompress from social media and the phone and all of that.
Absolutely. It was interesting to go off. I was very ready to just shut everything off. But then, 14 months later, it was time to go back on and reemerge. And I got so used to just, not emailing and not posting and not, finding pictures to post. And it took me a long time to really feel like I wanted to do this again, because it's so time consuming, I got very used to it.
Well, when you came back, you probably found a greater sense of balance with it all.
Oh, of course. And now it is all about balance. It's just as much rest as it is pushing my body and pushing my instrument. And it's about like balancing yourself. I can't work myself to the bone. And regardless of whether your career is physical or not, whether you're an athlete or not, you have to find that kind of balance between working very productively, and then resting and enjoying, your pursuits, however you relax, and doing that as fully as well.
Well, and that's why I think your book, A Body of Work, will be so great even for people who are entrepreneurs, because, when I first started as an entrepreneur, I was burning the candle at both ends and then sometimes in the middle,
Yeah.
doing as much as you can,
Absolutely.
And there comes a point where you burn out, and being able to have that balance that you were talking about, where you're able to have your downtime, have your work, and be able to do both, sometimes it's hard to figure out how to do that.
I completely agree. And, a lot of the times you learn the hard way. You do burn out. You do learn the hard way. But I think that's part of the path as well, because then you realize really you've learned, because you've learned the hard way. You actually really learn. Like the message gets through to you.
Well, I'd rather buy your book and take the shortcut.
I'll take you up on that.
Oh, I've been told there's no shortcut on the path of enlightenment, but I think your book does offer at least a little bit of a shortcut, So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I hope so.
Well, and so I know you've always got these wonderful things happening. You're on this amazing tour with your book. What other things do you have going on?
Well, I'm actually headed back to Australia in a week's time. I continue my connection down there. I'm resident guest artist with the Australian Ballet, so I have some performances down in Sydney, which is fabulous, and then I head to London to perform with the Royal Ballet. So the dancing card is busy. But, it's just an exciting time to finally, after 5 years of writing this book, to be able to share it with the world and share such an important message. It's not just about a dancer. It's about a dancer who, lost everything at the height of it and had to go through this arduous journey to, in essence, be rebirthed. And I'm just so excited to share it.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here and so delighted that you're back on stage. We're we're all just gifted having you, share your amazing talents with us. My goodness. And before we go, I also know that you have a scholarship that mentors young boys into a ballet career.
I do, yeah. That started a couple of years ago, and it's something that I keep, very passionately, because I know what it was like as a young boy to find the inspiration to dance, and a lot of the times you're working against the current. And so whatever I can do, it's a scholarship, but it's also a mentorship, and it's extremely fulfilling for me, and I know that the opportunity is there for a younger generation, and I'm thrilled to be able to offer that.
Oh, I think it's such a profound thing that you're offering, because my goodness, for young men and young boys who are looking to get into that, I mean, it's got to be a tough journey, and to have some ability, some help along the way is really got to just change everything around for them, at least make them feel like, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember the dancers that I looked up to when I was that age, and I wish I had had an experience like that, to sort of just one of my, I don't know, the dancer that I looked up to, just to guide me along, and I'm more than happy to do it. It really gives me a lot of fulfillment, because I remember so well what it was like.
Yeah. And, and thank you for providing that scholarship for these young boys, being able to, shape their career in dancing as well. And David, and before you go, where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
Well, they can certainly connect with me on my website, davidhallberg.com, but I'm also on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, first and last name. And I'm happy to share the journey, absolutely.
And also, people would want to pick up their own copy of A Body of Work, and don't forget to give it out as gifts for the holidays. So, David, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. A great chat. Thank you.
Well, we're at the end of our time today. What an inspiration David is. Make sure to pick up his book, A Body of Work. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all major retailers. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.